So the idea for today will be we'll do the Guru Puja, because you have to do the preliminaries, right? Otherwise you're not really meditating on, if you just sit down, like if we just sat down and said, okay, let's start, the 8 benefits of reliance, that's not proper Lamrim meditation, right? First you have to have, remember like the preliminaries, right? Clean, it's pretty clean, and offerings, and so on. Sit in the 7-point posture as close to it as you can, and so on. And then the last question, and then we'll start, is the Guru Puja itself. I have a question for you guys, which is, you know, I can say, because people are asking about this, you know, again, people ask for this day for their own practice, is, first of all, the Guru Puja is very often, I mean, if you're around Gelugpa Tibetan monks, they do the Guru Puja all the time, right? And they chant it. It's part of, most of them is their daily practice, it's part of their daily practice, rather, and they, also in groups, they'll chant it together. So, when doing this at home, I just want to point this out to you, like when doing this at home, right, like, you could just go through it, you know, reading it, and that's fine, and if you're familiar with it, then you're meditating as you go through it, right? It can be very helpful when you're at home if you have time, though, like to pause on certain verses and actually do it more extensively. And so I'll give an example, like, you know, there's like for the 7 limbs, which is the essence, right, of this preliminaries, which in the version we have is on page 15. I'll give one example, verse 39, right? Although all things are like a dream, lacking inherent or natural existence, we sincerely rejoice in the happiness and the joy of all Aryas and ordinary beings and every white virtue that's ever arisen. Now, if you can read that and rejoice in every virtue that's ever arisen, that's great, right? I'm just giving an example. It'd be like if you have time, though, it's really a wonderful practice to stop there, and you have the Guru tree here, right? The merit field of all the teachers and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So if you have time, right, then as you get to that verse, you can stop and you can think, okay, wow, like I really rejoice in the deeds of Lama Tsongkhapa and of his 2 disciples. I rejoice in the deeds of. Then you can start on the left, right? Mike's memorized all this, right? So you can start with like, of Maitreya, you know, and then Asanga and his brother Vasubandhu, and come down right through Haribhadra and, you know, before him, Vibhuktisena and so on. And that's how you can start, right? I rejoice in the, and then down through like all the Indian masters to Atisha. Then you can rejoice in the deeds of all the, what's it called? Next come the Atisha, and then Dromdonpa, his student, and then the great masters of the Kadampas, the old Kadampa tradition of Tibet, and then Lama Tsongkhapa himself, and then the you know, his students all the way down to your own teacher. And on this side, right, you can do all the from Manjushri to Arya Nagarjuna and so on. Then there are the tantric lineages, right, like so the masters of the Yamantaka lineage and of the Guhya Samaja and of the Chakrasambhara and the Hevadra. And so if you want to do this very extensively, you could have that be like an hour, right, of just rejoicing. Then you have all the Buddhas, like 1,000 Buddhas of this eon, and the 35 Buddhas of confession, the 7 medicine Buddhas, you have the Bodhisattvas, right, so there's rejoicing in the deeds of all the different Bodhisattvas. You can rejoice in the deeds of the Pratyeka Buddhas, and of the Arhats, of the Dakas, and the Dakinis, and so on, right? So it can be a very, very extensive topic. The same thing, where there's right before that is the verse, right? Before the eyes of those having great compassion, we lay bare with a mind of regret, whatsoever so this is confession, right? Again, it's sufficient if you just read that and think as you're reading it, but if you have time, right, to stop and think of every negative deed you've ever done, that could take a really long time, right? But that's a powerful practice again. Does that make sense? So I guess today, though, since our main, if we could do that easily and meditate for a long time on it, but since people want to cover the spiritual teacher, maybe we'll just read the text. I just wanted to say that's a good way to do it at home, is to really spend time. Same thing with refuge, right? To stop in the verse of refuge, you can stop and meditate. Okay, why am I taking refuge? You know, and then contemplate. I'm suffering. Others are suffering, right? You know, how do I liberate myself and others from suffering? It's only by reliance, right? So out of fear of suffering of yourself and others, right? And then thinking of the objects of refuge, developing faith, you know, understanding how they liberate sentient beings from suffering, you know, until you generate a sense of faith, and then taking refuge. You know, so each of these points you could actually meditate on quite a bit. And last comment about that is actually, you know, like in this practice we're about to do, right? Doing the Guru Puja and meditating on Lam Rim. I remember, you know, like in Tibet, for example, like yogis in actually, Rinpoche Rinpoche said this, right? That when he was like, he said that he was like in a, I don't know, it was a hut or a cave somewhere, like meditating. He was a student of Pabonka Rinpoche's, and they were like, you know, and that like the main practice of those yogis was the Guru Puja. So he was like, there were other yogis kind of around, and they weren't doing anything different than what we're about to do. In other words, they would meditate, but that's what they would do. In other words, they would do what I'm just describing, where they would read a couple of verses and then stop and meditate for a long time. Then they'd read a little more and stop and meditate. You know, they'd come to Lam Rim and they'd meditate on Lam Rim, and in that way they gained the realizations of the path, right? And they actually progressed through the levels of stages and paths of enlightenment, you know, towards Buddhahood. But their practice wasn't something different. It's quite interesting, right? In other words, what we're about to do is the same practice that the yogis in the Himalayas who became enlightened in one lifetime did. They weren't doing something different. So we know how to do it. The question is like, do we spend the time or not? So today at least we're trying.